لا تعجل بالقرآن من قبل أن يقضى إليك وحيه وقل رب زدني علما.
إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا وسيئات أعمالنا. من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له، وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له، وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. أما بعد. So moving on then in Al-Aqeedah Al-Wasitiyyah, we now get to the section where Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah is going to talk about Sifatul Makr wal-Kaid wal-Mihal lillahi ta'ala. And there are 4 ayat in this section. The first ayah that is quoted is وَهُوَ شَدِيدُ الْمِحَالِ. وَهُوَ شَدِيدُ الْمِحَالِ أي شديد الأخذ بالعقوبة. The meaning of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala being shadidul mihal is that He is severe in taking the people upon punishment. Severe in punishing the people, in taking them into punishment. وقيل إن المحال بمعنى المكر. And it has been said that the meaning of al-mihal, it is the same as al-makr, that you may say in English plotting or planning. وكأنه على هذا التفسير مأخوذ من الحيلة، وهي أن يتحيل بخصمه حتى يوقع به. وهذا المعنى ظاهر صنيع المؤلف رحمه الله. So the meaning here can be that there is some form of deception done to a person, or some form of trickery done upon a person, some means or some method is taken up until you are able to overcome, or you overcome that individual. والمكر قال العلماء في تفسيره إنه التوصل بالأسباب الخفية إلى الإيقاع بالخصم. That the meaning of al-makr is to use secretive or concealed and unknown affairs and methods quietly and secretly up until you overcome the enemy. أي أن تفعل أسبابا خفية فتوقع بخصمك وهو لا يحس ولا يدري. That you use the secretive methods or the concealed methods and you end up overcoming the enemy and he doesn't even realize it. ولكنها بالنسبة لك معلومة مدبرة. But as far as you are concerned, you know what you are doing and the steps you are taking. But your enemy does not know what is being done and what steps are being taken until he is already overcome. Until he is already overcome. والمكر يكون في موضع مدحا ويكون في موضع ذما. And this concept of al-makr, planning and plotting, in one regard it is praiseworthy and in one regard it is dispraiseworthy. فإن كان في مقابلة من يمكر فهو مدح. If it is in the context of doing that in opposition to the one who is trying to do it to you, then that is praiseworthy. لأنه يقتضي أنك أنت أقوى منه وإن كان في غير ذلك فهو ذم ويسمى خيانة. Because in that kind of circumstance, when someone attempts to plan and plot against you, but you are smarter than them, and you are able to overcome their plot and plan in a method that you employ and they don't realize. And so your planning overwhelms their planning. That is praiseworthy in that situation. They attempted to plan and plot against you to do harm to you, but you were able to practically carry out some methodology whereby you overcame their plot and plan and they didn't even realize. They didn't realize what you were doing, how you were doing it, and you overwhelmed them and overcame their plot and plan. Then that is praiseworthy upon you, showing that you are stronger than them and superior to them. But as for other than this type of circumstance, then it is dispraiseworthy. In other circumstances, a person is seeking to plan and plot against the individuals, then of course that is dispraiseworthy. وَلِهَذَا لَمْ يَصِفُ اللَّهُ وَلَمْ يَصِفَ اللَّهُ نَفْسَهُ بِهِ إِلَّا عَلَى سَبِيلِ الْمُقَابَلَةِ وَالتَّقْيِيدِ. And that's why when it comes to this issue of al-makr, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not describe himself with al-makr except in that restricted manner. In the manner of Allah doing that in opposition to those who were attempting to do it to him. As a rebuke upon those who attempted to plot and plan against Allah, against the believers. As a rebuke for them, as a contradiction or opposition to them in that scenario. That's how Allah mentions al-makr regarding himself. Not in an open manner, anytime, anywhere. That would be dispraiseworthy. But in the context of when the disbelievers were plotting and planning against Allah, that Allah plotted or planned superior to them and overwhelmed them and overcame them. كما قال تعالى, just as Allah mentioned as an example, وَمَكَرُوا مَكْرًا وَمَكَرْنَا مَكْرًا وَهُمْ لَا يَشْعُرُونَ. That they plotted their plots, their plans, and we plotted the plot, and they were not aware, they did not realize, they did not perceive it, indicating that they were weak, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala overcame them. Similarly, in other examples, وَيَمْكُرُونَ وَيَمْكُرُ اللَّهُ. And they plan and plot, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala plots or plans upon them. وَلَا يُوصَفُ لا يوصف Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bihi ala al-itlaq. You do not attribute this to Allah in an open way. You do not say that Allah is makir. فَلَا تَقُلْ إِنَّ اللَّهَ مَاكِرٌ. We don't say like that Allah is plotter or a planner in an open way, in an unrestricted way. It is not said like that. لا على سبيل الخبر ولا على سبيل التسمية. Neither do you say that just as an informative statement about Allah, and neither do you say that as actually a name to Allah. Makir. It is not said like that. ولا يقال إنه كائد. لا على سبيل الخبر ولا على سبيل التسمية. And neither do you say that Allah is Qaa'id, similar meaning, plotting and planning. You do not say that in an unrestricted and open way regarding Allah. ذلك لأن هذا المعنى يكون مدحا في حال ويكون ذما في حال فلا يمكن أن نصف الله به على سبيل الإطلاق. Because plotting and planning, depending on the circumstances and the context, it can be praiseworthy and it can be dispraiseworthy. So in an instance where you have that situation, it is praiseworthy in some contexts and dispraiseworthy in other contexts, then you cannot just use that name in an unrestricted manner to Allah. because that would then also include the dispraiseworthy meanings. You cannot use that name in an open way to Allah or mention that about Allah in an unrestricted and open way, because that would then include the dispraiseworthy aspects too. Hence, with these types, you must only mention them regarding Allah in the restricted context. That Allah planned and plotted in the context of those who had planned and plotted against Him, and Allah planned and plotted against them and destroyed them and overcame them. In that type of context, not generally that you plan and plot against a person or people. فَأَمَّا قَوْلُهُ تَعَالَى وَاللَّهُ خَيْرُ الْمَاكِرِينَ. In the Quran you see in Surah Al Imran that it is mentioned وَاللَّهُ خَيْرُ الْمَاكِرِينَ, that Allah is the best of planners. Allah is the best of the planners. This indicates the perfection to Allah. وَلِهَذَا لَمْ يَقُلْ أَمْكَرُ الْمَاكِرِينَ بل قال والله خير الماكرين. Allah did not say that He is the greatest or the most in terms of plotting. Rather, He said He is the best of the ones who plan. The best of the planners. The one who plots or plans. That Allah is the khairul makirin, not amkarul makirin. And there's a difference between the two. Amkarul makirin indicating open meaning with the dispraiseworthy aspect in it as well. But khairul makirin, the best of the planners and the ones who plot, that it's done in the context of against those disbelievers and wrongdoers, and that is from the justice that they were deserving of that. فنقول هو خير الماكرين أو نصفه بصفة المكر في سبيل المقابلة. So we can attribute to Allah the attribute of al-makr in the context that it is done in opposition to those who plot against Allah. In that context of Allah plotting and overwhelming and being superior to their plots and plans and destroying them, in that context then you can attribute al-makr to Allah. Not in an open context. In an open context it would then include the dispraiseworthy meaning too. So the Shaykh says نصفه بصفة المكر في سبيل المقابلة. That we can attribute it to Allah in that context when it is in opposition to the disbelievers. أي مقابلة من يمكر به فنقول إن الله تعالى ماكر بالماكرين لقوله تعالى ويمكرون ويمكر الله. So we say that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala plans against the planners and Allah plots against the plotters. Those planners and plotters against Allah, then Allah planned and plotted against them and overwhelmed them and overcame them. And that's why Shaykh al-Islam then mentions this second ayah from Surah Al Imran, وَمَكَرُوا وَمَكَرَ اللَّهُ وَاللَّهُ خَيْرُ الْمَاكِرِينَ. That they plotted, planned, and Allah planned, and Allah is the best of the planners, the best of the plotters. هذه نزلت في عيسى بن مريم عليه الصلاة والسلام مكر به اليهود ليقتلوه. In the ayat in Surah Al Imran it talks about how the Jews, they plotted to kill Isa alayhi salam. How the Jews plotted and planned to kill Isa alayhi salam. ولكن كان الله تعالى أعظم منهم مكرا. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was greater and superior to them and overwhelmed their plots. رفعه الله. Allah raised him up, raised up Isa alayhi salam to himself. بل رفعه الله إليه. رفع الله إليه. That Allah raised him up to himself. وألقى شبهه على أحدهم. and the resemblance of Isa alayhi salam was made in another person. The resemblance of Isa, resemblance of him was made in another person. على الذي تولى كبره وأراد أن يقتله فلما دخل عليه هذا الذي يريد القتل وإذا عيسى قد رفع فدخل الناس فقالوا أنت عيسى. So when the Jews, they were plotting to kill Isa alayhi salam, and one of them entered into that area, entered into the place where Isa alayhi salam was in order to kill him, then he realized that Allah has already raised Isa alayhi salam up to him. Allah has already raised Isa alayhi salam. And that man, the resemblance of Isa alayhi salam was made upon him. So that when the others, they were coming as well, when they arrived, all of them were coming to kill Isa alayhi salam. When they got in, after that first one, when they got in, they said, Anta Isa. They said, you're Isa. Because the resemblance had been put onto him now, similarity unto him now. قال لست عيسى. He said, no, I'm not Isa. قالوا أنت هو. They said, you are him. You are him. لأن الله تعالى ألقى عليه شبه. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had made the resemblance upon that first one who got in there to kill Isa. فقتل هذا الرجل الذي كان يريد أن يقتل عيسى ابن مريم. So then that man who had been from amongst the others, all going to kill Isa, that first one who got in there and realized Isa has already been raised up by Allah, then Allah planned of Isa. So when the others arrived, they thought that man was Isa. And so they killed him. They killed that individual. And those ayat, they are mentioned in Surah Al-Imran regarding how they were in doubt about the affair. And it mentions how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made that resemblance, وَلَكِنْ شُبِّهَ لَهُمْ, how that resemblance was made and they thought this other man was Isa alayhi salam. But in reality, مَا قَتَلُوهُ يَقِينًا, they were not upon killing him in certainty. So that was the second ayah that Allah was mentioning, وَمَكَرُوا وَمَكَرَ اللَّهُ وَاللَّهُ خَيْرُ الْمَاكِرِينَ. They plotted and planned, but Allah is the best of the plotters and planners. And so they had tried to kill Isa alayhi salam. Allah saved Isa alayhi salam, raised him up to himself. And those individuals, the first one of them, he was the one who ended up getting killed. And that's why Allah mentioned, مَا صَلَبُوهُ. They did not crucify him. مَا صَلَبُوهُ. They did not crucify him. مَا قَتَلُوهُ. They did not kill him. In the Quran, rather شُبِّهَ لَهُمْ. A resemblance was made for them and they ended up killing that other man. The third ayah that is mentioned here, وَمَكَرُوا مَكْرًا وَمَكَرْنَا مَكْرًا وَهُمْ لَا يَشْعُرُونَ. That they plotted and planned and we plotted and planned and they did not realize. هذا في قوم صالح كان في المدينة التي كان يدعو الناس فيها إلى الله 9 رهط أي أنفار تقاصموا بالله لنبيتنه وأهله، يعني لنقتلنه بالليل ثم لنقولن لوليه ما شهدنا مهلك أهله وإنا لصادقون، يعني أنهم قتلوه بالليل فما يشاهدونه لكن مكروا ومكر الله. قيل إنهم لما خرجوا ليقتلوه فلجأوا إلى غار ينتظرون الليل انطبق عليهم الغار فهلكوا وصالح وأهله لم يمسهم سوء فيقول الله ومكروا مكرا ومكرنا مكرا. In this instance, it is talking about the people of Salih and how they had plotted to kill him and his family. And they had plotted to do so at night. and so there would be no witnesses to that. But then when they made that plot and plan and they came at night and they went to the cave to wait for Salih, then it's mentioned in some of the books of tafsir, etc., how a rock came in front of them on that cave and they died therein. So they had plotted and they had planned to try and kill the Prophet, and yet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala overwhelmed their plotting and their planning. The fourth example mentioned here, أن إنهم يكيدون كيدا وأكيد كيدا. إنهم, they plot and plan. In this context, talking about the kuffar of Makkah. The kuffar of Makkah, إنهم يكيدون. They plot and they plan against the Messenger sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. إنهم يكيدون كيدا لا نظير له في التنفير منه ومن دعوته ولكن الله تعالى يكيد كيدا أعظم وأشد. So the disbelievers, they were plotting and planning against the Messenger in order to take the people away from the Messenger, in order to prevent the people from going to the Messenger, to shun the people away from the Messenger. They were plotting and planning against the Messenger in Medina, in Mecca. وَأَكِيدُ كَيْدًا. But Allah says, even though they are plotting and planning, وَأَكِيدُ كَيْدًا. That I plot the plot, or I plan the plan. وَمِنْ كَيْدِهِمْ وَمَكْرِهِمْ مَا ذَكَرَهُ اللَّهُ فِي سُورَةِ الْأَنْفَالِ وَإِذْ يَمْكُرُ بِكَ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا لِيُثْبِتُوكَ أَوْ يَقْتُلُوكَ أو يخرجوك. That they had made this plan with three different levels to the plan. That they would either imprison the Messenger, they would either get hold of him and imprison him and keep him captive, so he cannot give his da'wah, or they would kill him, finish him off, or they would expel him and get rid of him from there, remove him from that land so that he cannot do his da'wah and his da'wah finishes. They had made a plan on three levels: to take him captive, or to kill him, or to expel him and banish him from that land. وكان الرأي القتل أفضل الآراء عندهم بمشورة إبليس. So when they made their plan and their plot with the whispering of the shaitan, they concluded that the killing of the Messenger was the best plan. To kill him was the best plan. لأن إبليس جاءهم بصورة شيخ نجدي. It's mentioned in some of the stories that Iblis came to them in the appearance of an old man, in the appearance of a man, came to them and gave them his input and convinced them to kill the Messenger. فقال لهم انتخبوا 10 شبان من 10 قبائل من قريش وأعطوا كل واحد سيفا. This story is mentioned in the books of Seerah, how he whispered to them and told them that you should select a youth, a strong man from each of the tribes. From all of the tribes, pick one strong man from each tribe and give all of those selected ones a sword. ثم يعمدون إلى محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم فيقتلونه قتل رجل واحد. Then all of those individuals, each one from each tribe, will go and simultaneously all kill the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم. وحينئذ يلجؤون إلى الدية فتسلمون منه فقالوا هذا الرأي. They said, in that case then, when all of you kill him in one go, then it will not be known how or who the killer is exactly, and then you will just have to do the blood money, etc. You'll be safe. So this plan they agreed upon, that we'll all go together simultaneously, we'll kill the Messenger, and then we'll be able to get away with it afterwards. وَلَكِنَّهُمْ مَكَرُوا مَكْرًا وَاللَّهُ تَعَالَى يَمْكُرُ خَيْرًا مِنْهُ فقال ويمكرون ويمكر الله والله خير الماكرين. So they were making this plot and this plan, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions in the Quran that they plotted and planned, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala plotted and planned, and Allah is the best. فَمَا حَصَلَ لَهُمُ الَّذِي يُرِيدُونَ. So they were incapable of getting what they were planning, incapable of fulfilling their plan. بل إن الرسول عليه الصلاة والسلام خرج من بيته يذر التراب على رؤوس العشرة هؤلاء. It's mentioned in the seerah how the Prophet ﷺ exited from his house and he threw sand onto the eyes of all of those 10, and they were unable to then see him, they were unable to then perform their plan and carry out their plan. وَجَعَلْنَا مِنْ بَيْنِ أَيْدِيهِمْ سَدًّا وَمِنْ خَلْفِهِمْ سَدًّا فَأَغْشَيْنَاهُمْ فَهُمْ لَا يُبْصِرُونَ. So they were laid unconscious and they did not see the messenger and did not or were not able to then fulfill that plan that day. فكانوا ينتظرون الرسول عليه الصلاة والسلام يخرج فخرج من بينهم ولم يشعروا به. So they were all waiting there for the messenger to come out so they could all kill him, and yet when the messenger threw that upon their faces, they were unconscious, they did not realize and perceive the messenger exiting, and so they were not able to do that. إذن صار مكر الله عز وجل أعظم من مكرهم لأنه أنجى رسوله منهم هاجرا. So their plot and plan was not successful, and the planning of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was superior. That they planned to kill him, yet Allah saved him and he was able to do the hijrah and go from Mecca to Medina. وهكذا يكيد الله عز وجل لكل من انتصر لدينه. And this is how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala plans for all of those in goodness, for those who aid his religion. فإنه يكيد له ويؤيده. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala plans on his behalf goodness and aids that person, the one who aids the religion of Allah. قال الله تعالى كذلك كدنا ليوسف. That is how we planned or plotted for Yusuf, in his aid, planned and plotted and made the affairs for him good in his aid and in his support. يعني عملنا عملا حصل به مقصوده دون أن يشعر به أحد. That we planned in a way that he was able to achieve his objectives without anybody realizing how and what was going on. وهذا من فضل الله عز وجل على المرء أن يقيه شر خصمه على وجه الكيد والمكر على هذا الخصم الذي أراد الإيقاع به. And this is from the virtue of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protects the person from the evil of those who plot and plan against him, and protects the believers from the evil of those who attempt to overcome them with their plots and plans. And as we said, all of these names we say in English, plotting and planning and those kinds of names, but the reality in Arabic, التوصل بالأسباب الخفية إلى الإيقاع بالخصم. That you use concealed methods and you overcome the enemy without the enemy even realizing what has happened. Before the enemy even works out what's going on, you have overcome the enemy. That's the meaning of makar and these words that we're talking about. فهي في محلها صفة كمال يحمد عليها. So this attribute of planning or plotting and using those secretive or concealed methods and overcoming the enemy without the enemy even realizing what is going on, then that is praiseworthy in that context. In those contexts, that is then praiseworthy. So the important thing to remember here is, as we said, with these kinds of attributes, you do not attribute them in an open, unrestricted manner. Rather, this is something which is mentioned in a restricted manner alone. So Ibn al-Qayyim rahimahullah ta'ala mentioned in As-Sawa'iq al-Mursala والله سبحانه وتعالى لم يصف نفسه بالكيد والمكر والخداع والاستهزاء مطلقا. Allah did not attribute to himself these attributes of, as we say, plotting and planning and deception and mockery. Allah did not attribute these affairs to himself in an open way, in an unrestricted way. No. لا ذلك داخل في أسمائه الحسنى لا ذلك داخل في أسمائه الحسنى فإن هذه الأفعال ليست ممدوحا مطلقا. And neither can you use these as names of Allah. You don't say Allah is Al-Makir. You don't say Allah is Al-Mustahzi. You don't say Allah is Al-Mukhadi'. You don't use these types of words and say they are the names of Allah. You cannot do that because they have an aspect to them that is dispraiseworthy. And Allah is only attributed with these affairs in the praiseworthy angle alone. بل تمدح في موضع وتذم في موضع فلا يجوز إطلاق أفعالها على الله سبحانه وتعالى مطلقا. So these types of attributes, they are praiseworthy in one regard, dispraiseworthy in other regards. So they cannot be mentioned to Allah in an absolute and open way, rather only in a restricted way. فلا يقال إن الله يمكر ويخادع ويستهزئ فكذلك بطريق الأولى أن لا يشتق له منها أسماء يسمى بها. So you cannot just say in an open way that Allah plots and Allah plans and Allah mocks. You cannot just say it like that in an open way. And likewise, therefore, you cannot even derive the names from these attributes to Allah. Because remember the rule. Are there more names or are there more attributes of Allah?
More attributes.
More attributes, because the rule is on that every name has an attribute, but not every attribute has a name. Therefore, there are more attributes than there are names. Every name has an attribute, mushtaqqa minhu. But not every attribute has a name that it goes with. That shows that there are some attributes that don't have names. But every name definitely has an attribute. So that means there are more attributes than there are names. Every name has an attribute. So let's say, to make it easy to understand, you have 100 things here, you have 100 phones. Every phone has a SIM card that goes with it. How many SIM cards are there right now? 100. But then there are some spare SIM cards that haven't got any devices to go with them. So how many are more? More SIM cards in the phones. So every name of Allah has an attribute. But then there are more attributes that don't have names. So there are more attributes than there are names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And these are examples. These kinds of attributes, there are no names to go with them. You would not say Allah is Al-Makir and those kinds of things. بل إذا كان لم يأتي في أسمائه الحسنى المريد ولا المتكلم ولا الفاعل ولا الصانع لأن مسمياتها تنقسم إلى ممدوح ومذموم فكيف يكون منها الماكر والمخادع والمستهزئ. Even things like al-murid, al-irada. Has Allah got al-irada? Will, that Allah wills things, of course. But it is not a name of Allah, al-murid. And al-mutakallim, Allah speaks, the attribute, absolutely. But it's not a name of Allah, al-mutakallim. And al-fa'il, Allah does what He wishes. Fa'alun lima yurid. But it's not a name of Allah that He is al-fa'il. And as-sani', Allah is the one who creates and makes. Khalaqa, sana'a. But we don't say Allah is as-sani' as a name. If those kinds of names aren't even names of Allah, they are not names, but they have attributes, then what therefore of these kinds, al-makir and mukhadi' and mustahzi', they are obviously not names of Allah. Because in all of these there are angles that are dispraiseworthy. Only the praiseworthy aspects are attributed to Allah, not the dispraiseworthy. Therefore, those are not names that you make from them. وهذا لا يقوله مسلم ولا عاقل والمقصود أن الله لم يصف نفسه بالكيد والمكر والخداع إلا على وجه الجزاء لمن فعل ذلك بغير حق. So Allah did not attribute to Himself al-makr wal-kaid and planning and plotting and these words we use in English. Allah did not attribute these affairs to Himself in any open way, but only in the context of opposing those who were doing that without right. They were plotting and planning without right to harm others, so Allah planned against them and overwhelmed them. That is praiseworthy now to do justice and to stop that oppression. وَقَدْ عَلِمَ أَنَّ الْمُجَازَاةَ حسنة وعلم أن المجازات حسنة من المخلوق فكيف من الخالق سبحانه وتعالى. And we know that even in the creation amongst us, that having that type of recompense, if somebody plots and plans against you, but you are stopping their evil from occurring and recompensing them with what is due for them, that is justice and good in creation to give them what they are deserving of and their due recompense. So if that is the case amongst creation, then certainly for Allah to do that in regards to His creation and those who disobey, then that is something praiseworthy in that context. So with these types you have to remember that. So the main thing to remember, two principles that we've learned generally here: all of the names of Allah have attributes, not all of the attributes have names, therefore there are more attributes, there are names, and we've seen some examples here now. And with these kinds of attributes, then they have an angle to them that could be dispraiseworthy. So you don't attribute them to Allah in an open way, unrestricted way, whereas some of the others we've been doing before, they were openly attributed to Allah. They are praiseworthy attributes. But these have an angle of dispraiseworthiness. There is a possibility of something madhmoom within them. So only the praiseworthy aspect is attributed to Allah. And so they are only attributed in a restricted manner, not in an open manner. That is the end of that particular chapter on that section. And then the next one begins, which will have to begin the next time, is the sifatul afu wal maghfira wal rahma wal izza wal qudra. The attributes of pardoning and forgiving and mercy and might and honor and ability. All of those types of attributes and those ayat related to them. We'll start with those the next time, inshallah ta'ala, which is now going to be after Ramadan. Next weekend, Ramadan is starting. So there will be no classes obviously in Ramadan. It is going to be clashing directly now with Maghrib time. So classes will now be after Ramadan. They will be after Ramadan, and that's okay. That's okay, because the Salaf, some of them, it is known from them too, that they would stop their classes on purpose, not because of time clash or anything. On purpose they would stop their classes in Ramadan so everybody could focus on the Quran, can focus on their other worship and ibadah. So there isn't a problem with it. There's no problem with stopping the classes. It's even something good some of the Salaf did, so that everybody can focus on their worship during Ramadan, and you limit the number of classes and other types of knowledge in Ramadan, because the priority in Ramadan is the Quran, it is the recitation, it is the fasting, it is the prayer. And this knowledge, it is continuous all the time, in Ramadan, outside Ramadan, but in Ramadan, it's not going to be a higher priority and focus over and above the Quran and the prayer and those affairs. So we will not be able to continue this then. We will inshallah resume with this after Ramadan. Then you have an opportunity to revise over what you've done, go over the material, and inshallah we'll continue from that point after Ramadan inshallah ta'ala. Wa sallallahu ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam.